Bless.
Give a round of applause for the first speaker. Yeah.
You are all going to die. What kind of mark do you want your corpse to leave on your family and the planet? I have spent weeks reviewing the environmental impacts of funerals, cremations, and burials in databases such as ProQuest, Science Direct, and Sustainability, Science, Practice, and Policy. While funeral and cremation remains the primary ways to dispose of the dead, it's imperative that Los Angeles implement more eco-friendly and locally sustainable practices. Today, I will talk about the environmental, communal, and financial problems associated with the modern funeral regime, why it is essential to shift towards natural burial, and how we will begin to invest in this revamped funerary practice over the next few years. First, let us take a look at how average attitudes around death are hurting our community. For the reason of cost and accessibility, land availability, and the environmental impact of traditional death practices, we must make a paradigm shift in how we dispose of our dead. There is not enough room to bury all of our bodies. In a dense city such as LA, land is limited and valuable, and typical cemeteries render the land useless for years to come. According to Couts and Peers in the article Natural Burial as a Land Conservation Tool in the US on Science Direct, published in May 2018, there are a total of 145,000 places in the US designated as cemeteries, and most of them are not used anymore. Only 22,000 of them are still viable. So there was more than 120,000 places that are land being occupied and no longer being used, with just a bunch of dead bodies. Next, cheaper methods of burying the dead in our city often fail to satisfy the conditions that a mourning family likes to have met in order to pay respect to the deceased. According to Couts and Peers in that same May 2018 article, Natural Burial as a Land Conservation Tool in the US on Science Direct, there's an approximate $1,000 savings in choosing cremation over burial, and that cost is greatly reduced if you skip a funeral with a viewing and a ceremony, and it'd be only $2,200, which is still a high cost just to cremate someone and not really pay the respect to the deceased, because funerals are for the living. And then thirdly, the traditional methods of burial and cremation, if you can afford them, tend to be very difficult on the environment. Americans, especially here, are moving towards cremation of their departed, but the effect on the environment is very tough. According to Nasi and Associates, for becoming a tree when I will be dead, why not? Generation X, Y, and Z in Innovative Green Death Practices for Landscape and Urban Planning, Volume 178 in October 2018 says, needing a significant amount of fuel to sustain the high temperatures of incinerator machines, cremation uses a lot of energy and releases a lot of chemical compounds and carbon emissions into the atmosphere that are highly harmful to humans. And as well, when you are burying, there are about 800,000 gallons of toxic substances such as formaldehyde used for embalming that filter into the soil each year. So either way, there's some pollution. And then furthermore, according to multiple epidemiological studies, formaldehyde exposure during embalming is one of the causes of high mortality rates among embalmers and funeral directors. It is clear our options for death care are sparse and limited to the two, and there ought to be a way to ethically and responsibly depart with our dead without using an absurd amount of land, foregoing a ceremony, or destroying the environment. The fact is, a vast majority of people are either being buried or cremated, and I've proven thus far that neither option is sustainable for years to come. According to the Statista Research Department on Statista.com, the cremation rate in 2020 was 56.1%, and the burial rate was 38%. That makes up a whopping 94% of the population that's either being cremated or buried. Now, there are other options coming. The California Cemetery and Funeral Bureau published a 2022 summary of legislation relevant to their industry, and by 2027, a new option known as natural organic reduction will be made available to the public. This is basically where you decompose in a facility and your body turns into soil, which can be reused, obviously. And then one of the experts in her field, Elena M. Sleminski, in the article, Life of the Death System, Shifting Regimes, Evolving Practices, and the Rise of Eco-Funerals for Volume 19, Issue 1 of Sustainability, Science, Practice, and Policy. Eco-funerals have only been around the last 25 years. What was introduced was natural burials, which is essentially when you bury someone foregoing embalming, and you either use like a mushroom casket that will decay with you, or no casket at all, so it takes up a lot less space, and there will be no toxic formaldehyde will not be filtered into the soil. But the intensifying climate crisis recently is opening a window of opportunity for eco-funerals to become more powerful, because right now they only take up 6% of the market, but that is growing. While we're waiting for the rollout of this futuristic burial method, it is essential that we neutralize our carbon footprint in regards to cremation and help incentivize the population to turn towards natural burial so we can conserve fertile soil for our ever-growing population. This solution would benefit us in regards to Maslow's hierarchy on the tier of physiological needs, as we will be able to reinvest the energy, raw material, and land wasted back into the community. To address the environmental needs, we must advance our attention towards natural burials and eventually natural organic reduction. The individual will benefit from the esteem of their death not negatively impacting their planet, and Los Angeles will have more land to develop community resources with. We will invest in government advertising of natural burials, and once people are able to experience a dignified natural burial, some studies have shown that it will likely spread very quickly. Now, convincing everyone to alter their traditions around death won't happen overnight, but I believe with a plan, more natural methods of burial will be seen as essential in the next few years. I have 3 steps for action, and the first one would be petitioning for laws restricting misguided funeral practices such as unvaulted caskets, making embalming less needed, and making sure to reuse excess cremation energy. In some states, they're able to reuse the heat to heat government offices in the winter. Fund a citywide program. Well, step 2 would be to fund a citywide program for investing in businesses with an eco-conscious burial incentive imperative, preparing the market and the populace for the eventual legislation of human composting in 2027. And step 3 would be around 2027 is just holding public forums on people having questions and talking about why these practices are necessary as they roll out, and ensure that there's some sort of limit on the market so that it won't be too expensive, because historically greener things are overpriced as hell. Overpriced. What I expect to happen is shifting the market to rely more heavily on environmental funeral regimes will cause our groundwater to be cleaner, more land available for housing, and the city will have a much needed reduction in carbon emission. If we do not take action, cemeteries will continue to occupy fertile soil, the cancer rate of embalmers will stay high, and our ever-growing population will cause an increase in carbon emissions, soil toxicity, and misused land. There's not much time before, as individuals, you have to decide what to do with your body when you're done occupying it. It is unlikely embalming and cremation will be antiquated for a few decades, but we must make a cultural shift towards favoring natural methods for our futures and our children's futures. The problems with the funeral regimes are all enveloping, and addressing them will benefit many aspects of our lives. It's not sustainable to continue the production of cement headstones, wooden caskets, chemical preservatives, all at the expense of our land, morticians, and community. The proposed solutions will not only be cheaper, but much simpler. The individual psyche will benefit as much as our community. Steps for the market transition towards these sustainable practices will take a few years. However, complacency is not an option. Choose to be on the right side of history. Life will not last forever. Why should your bodies? In conclusion, talk to your family members, write in your diaries, decide how you'd like to be disposed of, and I hope you, like me, just agree that we should leave as we came, slowly decomposing as we were slowly composed. Thank you.